to our podcast. Today's debaters will be Annie Lawyer and Gavin Oscarson, embodying the knowledge of Aquinas and Al Ghazali. This is Ouija Theology, where we summon knowledge from dead philosophers to debate theology's hottest questions. Today's question will be, which argument is better for the existence of God? Uh, Taking the floor first will be Aquinas. There are five reasons for the existence of God given by Aquinas, found in the third article on the existence of God, which is his second question in Summa Theologiae, whether God exists. So his arguments are that from motion, from the efficient cause, from possibility and necessity, from gradation found in things, and from the governance of the world. Um, we're mostly going to focus on the arguments for motion, nature and efficient cause, and possibility and necessity. The argument from motion is basically that everything that is moved must be moved by another. And so, um, to quote Aquinas, motion is um, nothing else than the reduction of something from potentiality to actuality. Um, but nothing can be reduced from potentiality to actuality except by something in the state of actuality. So for this argument, God exists because there has to be a first mover, otherwise everything will just go on infinitely. So like something will be moved by something will be moved by something, and so we must have a first mover that does not require potentiality, but um, is uh, is actuality itself moves and is moved by no other. And so Aquinas understands this to be God. Um, and so for the nature of efficient cause is what creates something or brings something into existence, the cause of something, its existence, basically. And so that's the Aristotelian definition. But um, so this is kind of the same thing where something has to be created by something else, and that can go on for infinity. So you must have a first efficient cause, something that causes the existence of everything else. And so this would also uh, be God because there is because nothing can to quote Aristotle in there is no
Aquinas.
case to quote Aquinas, there is no case known in which a thing is found to be the efficient cause of itself, for so it would be prior to itself, which is impossible. Basically something can't create itself, and so there must be something that has always existed, and can create other things, can be the first efficient cause, which moves us into the argument of possibility and necessity, in which uh, there the existence of something that always exists is necessary, um, because if everything cannot exist, then there is a time where nothing exists, and something cannot come from nothing. And there's clearly something, as we're having this podcast debate now. And so, in order for there to be any existence, there has to be something that always exists and exists in necessity of itself. And so, other things can't existence can depend on other things can existence can depend on other things, but there must be a first existence to be the first mover, to be the first creator, and this is God. So to quote Aristotle, therefore we to quote Aristotle, uh
Aquinas or
to quote Aquinas, it is late. Okay, to quote Aquinas, um, uh, that every necessary thing either has its necessity caused by another or not. Now it is impossible to go on to infinity in necessary things which have their necessity caused by another, as has already been proved in regard to efficient causes. So we must have God as something that has always existed, to allow existence, basically.
Nice. Is that all of Aquinas's arguments?
Yes, that is all of Aquinas's arguments.
Yeah, they're pretty complicated. So Al-Ghazali is the person I'm representing, and he has kind of the opposite, where his whole thing is basically the philosophers are not to be trusted. Neither are kind of the theologians, because they both kind of use reason and cause and effect to try and kind of trace back the causes we see in front of us back to God. And so Al-Ghazali's problem with that is that cause and effect are not necessarily correlated. Like it's the extreme version of correlation does not equal causation. Um, he explains this in a quote in The Incoherence of the Philosophers. The connection between what is customarily believed to be a cause and what is believed to be an effect is not necessary, according to our opinion. But each of the two, namely cause and effect, is independent of the other. So basically, causes can happen, effects can happen, and they might not have anything to do with each other. So in the end, you kind of effectively get rid of the connection between cause and effect and make those categories almost like arbitrary. So to say that like fire causes cotton to burn, he would Al-Ghazali would say that might not necessarily be the case. And his reasoning for this is because God can kind of do things that are against the laws of cause and effect, or the kind of the things that happen for Al-Ghazali are purely just choices, like arbitrary acts of God's will that he decides to do at that very moment. So one of his examples, right, is you would think that eating is the way that you satisfy hunger, but he says it is within the power of, in the Incoherence of the Philosophers, the quote is, it is within the power of God to create satisfying hunger without eating. So for him, this would get rid of kind of the connection between the cause of eating and the effect of hunger being satiated. So his way of getting to God is by arguing that the mystics are the only ones that can really apprehend God. And so one of the quotations from Deliverance from Error is it is above all mystics who walk the road of God. And so he learned this through firsthand apprehension and experience, where he kind of went the mystic path where he tried to kind of do the prayers and do the rituals that were necessary to become a mystic and spend a lot of time in isolation and stuff like that. And so he said, another quote from him is, "It is the purification of the heart completely from what is other than God." And so that is the way of kind of um, achieving or preparing yourself to achieve a mystical experience of God, which for Al Ghazali is the only way to truly know Him. And so he says this is important because all the other ways that people try to view him through like scripture, through like causes, are kind of not useful if you don't already have the immediate experience of God. And his example is in Deliverance from Error, where he says, in general, the man to whom he has granted no immediate experience at all apprehends no more of what prophetic revelation really is than the name. So yeah, I guess that would be his argument for the existence of God. And I guess how would Aquinas kind of argue to or respond to Al-Ghazali's accusation that cause and effect are not necessarily correlated, or that you can't really use them to understand God or to come to a or to know of his existence?
Aquinas kind of covers this in uh, the first article of the question in whether the existence of God is self-evident, because in order for Al-Ghazali to kind of take that, I guess these experiences or from God, you have to know God or free God or have. I feel like with Al-Ghazali's arguments, there's no way of actually knowing that God exists other than just knowing it. It seems like, and you can correct me, but before you do that, to answer your question, yeah, this is basically his response to objection Um, one where it seems that the existence of God is self-evident, for those things are said to be self-evident to us, the knowledge of which exists naturally in us, as we can see in regard to first principles. Um, but as Damascene says, the knowledge of God is naturally implanted in all, therefore the existence of God is self-evident. Uh, Aquinas' response to that is basically that general truth is self-evident, but there's a primal truth that is not self-evident to us, and I think that requires further explanation into Aquinas' views on primal truth versus universal truth. And so for Aquinas, uh, the existence of God is self-evident in that um, God is his own essence. He's like he's the actuality, he's the first mover, he's kind of contained in one. But to quote Aquinas further, he will say that a proposition is self-evident because the predicate is included in the essence of the subject, and gives the example, man is an animal, for animal is contained in the essence of a man. If therefore the essence of the predicate and subject be known to all, the proposition will be self-evident to all, as is clear with regard to the first principles of the demonstration. So basically, the fact that God exists is it's
It's within like the
self-evident
principles
because
of it's within like the principle that's within you, right? It's in kind of like or the nature of God is
yeah, so basically God knows his own existence. It's self-evident, but for us it's not self-evident because um there are doubters who are unsure of the existence of God, and so the existence of God needs to be demonstrated to us,
try to
and
reason and stuff through like the
yeah.
universal truth that everybody has, because not everybody agrees on the primal truth that
Yeah.
he's talking about.
And so basically, people will know God through his effects. So I'd say that's our argument that in order to know God, you must have effects or something like that. Yeah.
And so you have to have cause and effect in order to use your universal truth to get to the primal truth that God exists.
Yes.
Okay, so I think Al-Ghazali's answer to that would be that God kind of exists above kind of the universal truth, or that the universal truth is somewhat arbitrary. Um, and his quote to kind of explain this is in the Coherence of the Philosophers, he says, "In God's power there are strange and wondrous things, not all of which we have observed. How is it proper that we should deny their possibility or affirm their possibility?" So basically, we have not observed everything that God's capable of, right? And that could be to the end of like getting rid of the universal truth or making the universal truth like arbitrary. And so, because we don't know this, right, we can't actually be certain that there is like a universal truth in order to use to get back to God. And so, the only thing that would actually be able to give us direct experience of God wouldn't be kind of um, the arbitrary things that God governs, right? It would be the the direct action of God Himself telling us that He is there, which in Al-Ghazali's experience comes from walking the way of the mystic and preparing yourself in order to have that experience and enter that state of mind. So I guess that was it. That was the end of our podcast. Who do you think had the better arguments?